Um, so
Thanks so
yeah,
much, Mehdi, for joining us on short notice here to talk about sales funnels and growth, which I think is tying in nicely with what Joel and Thibaut previously mentioned. Mehdi, really admirable what you built in the past in the US and out of Switzerland in the software as a service space, especially, but also how you're analyzing basically funnels holistically and not just like lead gen or basically closing or customer success. Don't want to take more time away from you, but hit us up on how to build sales funnels and growth in a B2B context.
all right. Thank you, Manuel, for having me. Hey guys, today I'm gonna talk uh, about funnels, sales funnels, marketing funnels, specifically for the growth stage. As you're entering the growth stage, how to think about funnels, and how do I think about to start creating the funnels to reach a point in your startup where you can grow faster and actually scale exponentially. Who the hell I am to talk about this? I started my career as a robotics engineer, but that's what I call my past life now. Got into founding my own startup almost a decade ago. Couldn't scale that much, failed some more, started some more, then grew one startup to more than 200 employees, from 5 founders to 200 employees in less than 2 years. And then I had another one. I had another exit back in 2018, end of 2018, and since then I'm helping other founders with their growth and scale potential. So one of the things we also always talked about in a startup is different phases of startups and what should every startup do in different phases. So of course, the first phase which get most talked about is product market fit. The second stage would get most talked about is scaling the company and how we can grow and scale. One stage in particular get least talked about is getting ready to scale stage. And this is the stage where we're going from having product market fit, having a product that customers actually want, having few sales, customers are saying good things about you. But then how do we turn into a machine that can scale exponentially, that can grow faster, that can get you easy access to money? And that is all about getting something which is repeatable, scalable, and profitable, hopefully at the same time. And once you have that effectiveness of your funnel, then scaling is comparatively straightforward. But if you don't have that, then scaling is a very haphazard thing that just exponentially grow the problems that you already have, along with whatever else you're doing, and then it becomes much more messy. And many companies with great products, especially with great products, die in this stage where they try to scale way too early before they're ready for it. So the secret ultimately to building this repeatable sales model is what I call sales assembly line. And just like the Ford invented the assembly line for automobiles, or assembly line in manufacturing period, he did a major transformation from making a company based on people to based on processes. What's your main focus? Is it people or is it process? Because people are not scalable, processes are. And that's kind of how I also look at sales, that we need to transform sales from the sales hero or the hero salesperson mentality to there is a hero process mentality. And this sales assembly line, again, just like an assembly line, ideally it should work on one side, you're getting the leads or prospects, on the other side, you are getting the sale. And each part of the assembly line can be automated or can be manual, can be a combination of two, and so on and so forth. But the key parameters to that is it has to be effective, may not be efficient in the beginning, but it has to be effective. Which means that you have predictability obviously, that this many leads goes in with this quality, so you get this many customers after X number of days and after Y number of steps. It is scalable by default, because once you have an assembly line, you can just copy and create another one. You can copy it and create 100 others. And it has to be end to end. Now, end to end is a bit more complicated question, because what does it mean? What is the starting point and what is the end point? And that very much depends on the kind of business model you have. So if you are more on the left side of the diagram that is on the screen right now, you can define the end of the sales cycle when the contract is signed or when the payment is made. But as you are, if and as you are more on the right side of this spectrum, then you cannot end your sales cycle when the contract is signed or the first payment is done, because ultimately your revenue comes in from the impact that your product is having. So the customer doesn't churn, because you're going to have anyway a huge customer acquisition cost, and it's not very uncommon to break even with the customer acquisition cost in terms of revenue after 5 months, 6 months, 18 months of a customer continuously paying you and using your platform. And that's why it becomes very important that that also is part of your sales cycle, because if the customer is churning, well, you're losing money. And whatever and however you sell, it's irrelevant. And which brings to the beginning of the sales cycle. So if it's ending more on the side of customer growth and customer impact, then it has to begin somewhere. And the way I would use something like this is more of a template to start with the buyer's journey and map it onto what internally goes in the company. So the buyer's journey always start with acknowledging the prospect, acknowledging or at least realizing that they have a problem. If they don't know that they have a problem, or they don't know if the problem they have is any impact, then the sale is not going to happen in any short term. First, they have to reach a point where they realize that they have a problem. So any place where you have to educate your prospects that they even have a problem, or what is the impact of the problem, even in the most basic sense, then I would keep it outside this funnel. Like that's even like a pre-funnel to your main funnel. And from there, you have very clear understanding of saying, okay, I have a big problem. Then your job is to drive a prospect from knowing that they have a problem, that there is a solution, and of course this company can potentially help us, and yes, this is going to help us succeed or solve the problem and get the impact. Then again, the rest of the funnel is about it works as it promised. Yes, we have achieved the impact and we have achieved it consistently. And then you think about how can we grow with the client, how we can even give more impact to the client we have. So that's what I meant kind of with end-to-end funnel design. But before we even get to like, okay, are we ready to even design this kind of funnel in our business? Are we even ready to think about, are we ready to grow? Or how do we implement the process where we create a process to scale? I usually think about these 3 questions as a litmus test. The first question is, can we define the problem we are solving without ever talking about a product? Second is, can you measure the impact of for the customer or for the prospect for not solving the problem? And then can you measure the ROI? Now, what metric do you use to measure? It's going to be very different for each company and every product. But at the end of the day, it has to be somewhat measurable for you to be effective in growth in most of the cases. The second thing about the most common question comes around at this stage is how, that's fine, we get a template, but we have to still make this template into what fits us, what fits our customer journey. So how do we define our funnel stages? Do we send an email? Is that a funnel stage? Do we have a meeting? Is that a funnel stage? And to it, the answer is the funnel stages is not about what you are doing. It's about what your customers or your prospects are doing. So the funnel stages have to be a stage where your prospect does something. And that something should be clear and measurable. And it should have a clear indication that yes, customer is moving forward in their buying journey. Now, again, this is going to be very different for each product and every company, and we can discuss more in details or answer specific questions in the discussion. But for now, I'll leave it at that it has to be about prospects doing something. At the same time, it has to be measurable and clear. It cannot be ambiguous that whether they reach the second stage or not yet. And to that extent, beware of the vanity actions like asking for a price. It can be indicative, but it's a very low quality funnel stage. Inviting you for a coffee, scheduling next meeting, these are not the events. This is just the process. They can stay in the same stage of the funnel and keep scheduling 20 meetings with you. How do we optimize that and make sure we only schedule 5 instead of 20 meetings? That's more about conversion rate optimization. But here, I'm not going to touch that topic yet. We're just going to talk about the designing of the funnel and the stages at this stage. The another thing people sometimes get confused about is lead scoring and funnel staging. They're not the same. They can go in parallel, and the person and a prospect can continue to score, gain a score in terms of lead scoring, but they might stay in the funnel, same funnel stage. So it's not the same, but they're more like parallel concepts, and they help each other. Once we have a bit of idea about stages, the buyer's journey first and then the stages later, then I would think about, okay, in each stage, what is the main concept for my actions? What is the goal of my action before I go in the even further detail? So in this template example, the awareness is talking about the impact they can have and not the pain. Not focusing too much on the pain, but impact. Then second is not about qualification. My focus should be on starting a conversation. In the third stage, it's not about just going and pitching and doing a demo, but actually diagnosing and making sure that we understand their problem right. We are a good fit, and so on and so forth. And in the terms of after that, it's trade, not negotiate. It's not just about how we can reduce our price to close this deal today, but more about, okay, what maybe there are some intangibles you can provide us so that we can, let me put my mobile to silent, so that we can in trade-off we can reduce our price or provide some additional features and so on and so forth. Once that is a bit settled, then I would go through each of the stage, and then I would go in further more details about exactly how the flow chart of that touch point is going to look like. I mean, it's pretty easy when we talk about the product flow charts, the flow charts in softwares, or even when we talk about user journey online. You know, the person comes on the Facebook ad and then he clicks on the page, and then he or she go to the website, put their email address, download an ebook. It's something similar, but it's something more deeper in terms of, especially when it comes to having phone calls or having demos. And then I would also create scenarios which are indicated more like in red dotted lines in this diagram, where we know that this is often occurrence, that this happens, and we have to have a backup plan in the conversation about it. So many times we talk about what is the current situation, and then we get to the point, we realize that client is venting, it's not talking about the problem. So maybe we should go back to the situation and try to niche down the situation back again so the pain comes out. The same thing happens when the person, we summarize the pain to the problem. And just in the context of discovery call, to take an example, we go too quickly to pitching or to demo, then we often see that the client is, or the prospect is disengaged. And they just go in clicking here, clicking there, but they're ultimately will not be able to make a quick decision to buy or not, because they don't see impact yet, or they don't really realize the impact they can have yet. And once that is done, then I would see and say, okay, how do we map the people into this so we can truly have an assembly line? And as you see here, it's not about really departments. Also, sometimes it might look like that. But it's more having a coherent strategy of having different channels. In this case, we're just taking simple inbound and outbound. So of course, inbound is handled by marketing, outbound is handled by SDR. But when we go in more details, then do the marketing goes to really MDR and AE, or it should again goes through SDR, depending on the kind of funnel and marketing, the part of the marketing funnel you have. So each stage might have its own funnel, so to say, and that is something you can do much more rapid experiment with. It's so that what happens at the end of the day, it's a multi-layered funnel in which there is a base layer, for example, something like this, and then you have a marketing funnel on top of that, and then you might have a social media funnel on top of that. And each funnel, and it then, once you do this, start designing like that, it's becomes so easy to move components around, throw away things that are not working, detect things that are working versus not working, and do much more customized and faster conversion rate optimization. And it goes much faster, and it costs much less because also it goes faster. So at the end of the day, once we have all of that, we should have a sales assembly line, which is effective, predictable, scalable, and end-to-end. Once we start to reach that point that at least the sales assembly line is effective, it might not be again efficient, then we reach a point where we can start scaling. And then usually you get into these cyclic phases where you say, okay, our assembly line or the sales funnel is effective, but we need to make it more efficient. Typically, when you do that, your effectiveness is going to go down a little bit. And then the next phase in the cycle comes in, okay, let's increase the effectiveness. And then it's effective, but then we say, okay, let's make it more efficient. And then the effectiveness goes down. So there is always the cyclic thing, which in combination with conversion rate optimization gets your company scaling much faster than if it's not organized this way and we're just thinking about hiring more people and throwing money at the problem. Because part of the assembly line, which I didn't talk about yet, is also not assembly line per se, but getting that ready to scale is also which goes in parallel to the assembly line, is how do we deal with automation and people? What do we automate? What do we give it to, what do we still handle manually? And then if we have to handle something manually, how do we hire and onboard people? Can we hire 20 people tomorrow and onboard them in a month? Or we have to tell them like, okay, first guy hire, and then the second guy we hire, we have to say, follow the first guy. He follows the first guy for the 6 months. He learned all the good things, but he also learned every bad thing the first guy is doing. That's not very scalable. Even if your funnel is scalable, then your hiring is a bottleneck and onboarding is a bottleneck. So once they start to go in parallel, then you start to reach a point where you're ready to scale. And just to go back to this slide, yes, product market fit, save as much money as you can, start spending a little bit, start spending on experimentation rather than client acquisition, on getting ready to scale and scaling the company. Once you have done that, once you have a predictable, scalable, profitable growth model, then your job as a founder is to spend as quickly as possible, as much as possible, to replicate that assembly line, replicate that that funnel, and put more gas into the engine, as much as you can, so it grow faster as you can. And that this is the point where it's also get much easier to get funding, because for investors, they know you that you have figured everything out. You just need money to scale and put gas into the already running engine. So that's pretty much it from my side as a quick intro. Happy to connect with you guys on LinkedIn. Is my LinkedIn address. Manuel can share with you also later. And yeah, happy to have some discussions. Any questions, any doubts, any disagreements?
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing these thoughts on how to go from startups to scale up. As always, like really helpful to see things not just from a lead gen perspective or a customer success perspective or a closing perspective, but integrated. I just posted a link to connect with Maddie into the chat. Any questions that you have, like ask them now. Not be silent forever, but that's probably easiest. So far, nothing in the chat, but let's wait for 2 more minutes.
Also, would great. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I just hijack Q&A until somebody asks a question then.
Sure.
Maddie, something that we see a lot of times in B2B startups with B2B entrepreneurs, they are either of the opinion that in B2B sales, B2C stuff, how they call it, doesn't work. You cannot do a newsletter, you cannot do referrals, or they basically go overboard and send people stuff every 3 days, like with a newsletter and sign up here, buy this. How do you find out what's the right kind of cadence and number of touch points with a B2B audience, basically investing 25 to 250K plus per year with you?
Don't make too many assumptions in the beginning, and experiment. Do them faster, do them quicker, do them on a scale that suits them. So I mean, I have so many examples where I told the guy in B2B sales, you should run Facebook ads now, and the guy said, no, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. We're targeting like super CXO financial guys. Facebook ads are not going to work. I'm like, let's just do A/B testing for a month between LinkedIn and Facebook. And to their amaze, it did happen many times that they got 0 leads from LinkedIn for the first month, and they get 20 leads from Facebook. Of the right guy.
So an insight is also to not just do something for like 2 weeks, basically get 10 data points, is like doesn't work, which we often see. It's like I tried LinkedIn, like I called 5 people, none of them answered.
Right. So there are 2 things. Like every channel has its minimum requirement that you have to test. If you test Facebook with $2 a day for even 3 months, it doesn't matter. The data is irrelevant because it's way too small. But at the same time, if you it doesn't make sense to spend $10,000 a day for on Facebook for a month to get you basic understanding that the people you're targeting are even on Facebook or not.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The second thing is also people who have never done Facebook ad, never have done Facebook ad successfully. Just to take an example of Facebook ad, they would run some campaigns without understanding the whole mechanism, and they will run it for a few days or a few weeks or even a month, and they say Facebook ad doesn't work for us.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I would try to sometimes take a shortcut is just look at what channels your competitors are using. Or if you don't have competitors, who else is selling something completely different maybe, but to the same person that you're selling. Sell it on Facebook, and you can you hear me?
Yes, now again, connection restart.
Okay, that's weird. But now you can hear me loud and clear or not yet?
Please go ahead. Everything fine again.
Okay. So I was just asking, till when did you hear? So I can repeat the last part.
We heard you until basically like not making mistakes of the channel is not working with you, not gaining enough exposure and data points on it upon validation. If you, for example, never run Facebook ads, you test it out, like there's no leads coming in after 2 to 4 weeks, you might want to tweak, but do that iteratively very quickly. So that part we heard.
Or take advice from people who have a lot of experience with that in the same domain. Of course, I mean, there is a bit of this difference between B2B and B2C, but at the end of the day, what you're doing with that specific part of the funnel. But to take the example of Facebook ads, all you want is right people to click on it and take an action. So take run it through some experienced people and see what they think. That does it make sense or not? Maybe your targeting is off. Maybe your assets are off. And then the other thing you also need to look at is competitors. Are your competitor able to use some channel successfully? Are they putting money in some channel? And if you don't have competitor, look at companies who are selling something else, but to the same person that you're selling to. What channels do they use? So if they are able to use Facebook and your Facebook is not working, then there is a problem with your strategy of Facebook, not with the channel as a Facebook.
Amazing. I think these are great closing words. To not give up too early if you're new in a go-to-market or in a specific sales channel or a sales mechanism. Thanks so much, Maddie, for sharing these thoughts with us. I put the link to the chat how you can reach out to Maddie on LinkedIn. Otherwise, go to startup2scaleupnow.com or call up Maddie phone number on screen as for all kind of people speaking today pretty much. Thanks so much for joining us and all the best.
Thanks, Manuel. All the best to you too.